Good morning. Welcome to AIA Southwest Florida's 2023-24 season of Coffee Talk. I'm Stephen J. Ruby, AIA, and I'll be moderating our discussion this morning. This morning we're talking with Matthew Kragh. Matthew is an architect here in Naples. He's the founder and the president of MHK Architecture, which was established in 2009. Previous to that, he was principal architect for Architectural Network PK Studios between 1999 and 2009. Matthew has an impressive resume of community participation. He was past president of AIA Florida Southwest. He was VP of the United Arts Council in Collier County. He was on the board of directors of Naples Downtown Association, on the executive board of the ULI, Urban Land Institute. He was a committee member for the Economic Development Council. He was on the South Florida Land Preservation Trust board member. He's a co-founder of Beacon Hope Foundations, and he was on the board of Certified National Kidney Foundation. Quite a list. Matthew holds a Bachelor of Science from Architectural Tech in Western Kentucky, and a Master's of Architecture from IIT in Chicago, an impressive architectural school. Matthew has received a number of awards from AIA and the building industry. In 2004, AIA Florida Southwest honored him as the Humanitarian Architect of the Year for his participation, as you just listed his participation in community involvement. He is also the recipient of the Frizzell Medal of Honor, which is AIA Southwest Florida's highest honor of distinction for distinctive architectural work. In 2014, MHK was designated the Firm of the Year by AIA Southwest Florida. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here on this nice, wonderful morning in Naples. You're probably one of the most prolific architects in Naples. You are responsible for some of the largest and most iconic buildings here, and there are even more of them going up. You can see the cranes of your projects right across the street from where we're sitting here. We both know that there's a tension between the desire in Naples, both by the residents and the leaders, to maintain our character, a charming Naples character. And that tension with the pressures of the market, because we are an international tourist and second home destination, and the market pressures and the desire to maintain character in the city, we know those tensions are there. How do you balance those in your practice?
Boy, that's a great question. There's so many different ways to kind of answer that or come to a conclusion on that. First off, I've always believed in a good balance in everything in life. From balance of work versus balance with family time, balance with personal time. I truly believe in a good balance of nature. The balance of architecture in a community like this gets really tricky. The reason it gets tricky is you have a very diverse community, and when I say diverse, it's not social diversity, it's more diversity from backgrounds in monetary components. We have, for instance, one of our larger projects, Naples Square, has caused a lot of controversy in the neighborhood. It was one of the first larger downtown projects. It's comprised of about 300 residential units. In that particular district, it was an enterprise zone in the city. It had development incentives, and through the recession, they were trying to bring new life to a rather blighted area. Those 300 residential units has sparked a pretty significant catalyst. Now you start to see mom and pop shops show up. You see a bakery down the street, a restaurant, and so forth, and you start in a little coffee shop. So you see this vibrant community starting to work. And then at the same time, you see a different part of the same community that has been here, made their money someplace else, likes the sleepy beach town, doesn't want to see the traffic, doesn't want to see density, doesn't really care about affordable housing or more. And when I say affordable housing in Naples, it's almost a joke. I mean, we're talking $2 million for a unit versus, $15 million for a house. But that's the sort of diversity I'm talking about. I mean, there's the city is made up of different neighborhoods, and people want to, live in a walkable community. So those are sort of the things that this density has brought. But it also brings, the perception of additional traffic, or harder to make a dinner reservation, or something like that. But at the same time, I think here in Naples, we're a small knit community, or a small city, but we are surrounded by a very large county. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of people that I know that live in the county, and the first thing they talk about when they come down is, going to eat at Campiello's down on 3rd Street or something like that.
That's interesting, because one of the visiting sessions that we had here a couple of weeks ago, mm-hmm. Our city manager made that exact point. He said that Naples really wasn't growing. It wasn't a density issue in the city. What it is the double of the population in the county.
That's right.
And that it isn't a city problem, it's a county problem that we have. The pressures from the development in the county.
That's right.
Are probably more impactful on our city than the development pressures in the city.
I'd say many times more.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sprawl that's happening in the county, but we still have the heart of Naples is still down here, which everybody wants to visit. To answer that question a little bit better from an architectural point of view, I do struggle with that, because density can sometimes mean larger scale masses. And in the city, we have a 3-story and 42-foot tall building height. So if somebody buys a property and they want to do 12 units per acre, you're going to get kind of short, flat, and large, versus a little bit taller, a little bit skinnier, a little bit more open space. So it does become a bit of an issue and a design challenge.
Well, how does your design approach manage change in general? My mantra, and you've heard me say this on DRB, that change is inevitable. We need to manage it, so
yes.
we don't destroy our character.
Right.
So how does your approach to design here in Naples? How do you look at change and manage that change?
Unfortunately, many times our management of that change is a little bit more reactive rather than staying ahead of it, and a lot of that has to do with the market. I mean, condos in general were a dirty word back in 2008 and 9, and then they kind of went to sleep. And then when they came back in 2014 or so, and the city started strengthening the zoning codes a bit, it made it a little bit more of a challenge that we're always sort of reacting to instead of being proactive with it. Many times we rely upon municipalities to hire urban designers and planners to come in and help master plan the community, and a lot of times that helps. We've seen very good success with that on 5th Avenue South, where we've kind of fallen in line and follow those trends. As far as like being an industry leader and staying out in front of it, it's very hard to do. It's kind of like figuring out when to stop raising interest rates.
Well, do you find that some of those limitations are a positive force or a negative force to your design? I find sometimes that if I have a clean sheet of paper and clean site, it's much more challenging to create than if you have there's some guardrails around you that you work within.
It's one of my favorite parts of my profession is having these different components in place, whether it's zoning, whether there are political issues going on within the community, or whether we're looking at a lack of growth or an excessive amount of growth. Sitting in the conference room with the client trying to figure out it's not just solving the problem these days. A lot of it is defining what the problem is, and that can be a very fun and challenging thing. And just like you said, from an architectural standpoint, that's where the creativity comes from, is how to become a problem solver when you don't even understand what the problem is.
That's very interesting, because I think the public in general think that we make blueprints.
Right.
And I don't know how your clients, I think you maybe have some very more sophisticated clients, but we really are problem solvers.
That's right.
And to get the public and even some of our professionals to understand that it's not about always about the design, it's about solving the problem first.
Yes.
So I think that's a very good point that
yes,
you
sir.
make.
I would say you know as well as any other architect that these days we spend probably 90% of our time being advocates for the community, trying to educate politicians, trying to educate the community, and maybe 10% of our time actually drawing lines.
I want to move on to something else. You've been practicing here in Naples for almost a quarter of a century, according to your resume. You've seen market trends and styles and priorities and policies change, and you've really been very good at responding to them pretty quickly and effectively. Where do you see the changes in trends heading as a younger generation finds Naples and us baby boomers?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're a baby boomer necessarily, but us older folks die off, and now we have our children and grandchildren coming down here with a very different set of values and a very different set of needs. Where do you see us going in the next 20, 25 years?
That's a question that is on our conference table and board quite often within our firm, and we're always looking for what is the next, and I don't want to call it a trend, because we really don't want to strive for a trend. I have a few buildings in town that I'm very proud of. However, I see that trend sitting on the cladding, like stacked stone. Oh, that was 2014. Became very popular, and I would watch the design review board, and everybody had stacked stone on every project for a few years, and you would see those sort of trends, but I call them more fads, right? They're going to come in and out of style. We try to strive for timeless architecture. It's really funny. I remember my very first job interview down here was with Al French, and somebody warned me and said, wear a white shirt and a tie. And Al is very old school architect, and
yes,
and it was a very short interview. He had asked where I'd gone to school, and I went to Illinois Institute of Technology, which of course is Mies van der Rohe's founding school of modern architecture, where the glass and steel skyscraper came from. And Al's quick response to me was, there's not a lot of need for that here in Naples. And that's about as far as the interview went, which was quite funny. And I got to tell you, Mies van der Rohe is probably rolling over in his grave seeing the type of architecture that I practice down here versus what I was taught in school. But I think there's an appropriate location and ambiance for any type of architecture in town. In fact, we love doing, going to that School of Modern Architecture. I still love doing a very classic, I'll do a classic historic house, or characterize buildings with classic forms and get into looking into the history of those types of buildings and those massing and architectural components and details. I get just as much of a thrill out of looking into that component of architecture as I do kind of creating and inventing a new genre for architecture. So really, I think it really depends on its context, what it's next to, what's appropriate. We're going to have a very diverse architectural city. I already see we have most of the clients that come in our office are looking for kind of a more historic, grassroots, Florida clapboard siding, vertical board and batten, metal roof, architectural details, more of an old Florida. I don't even like to classify things as styles, but many people want to go that direction, maybe with a twist. But I also see some of my my peers doing some extremely beautiful flat modern roof, beautiful houses that are a little bit more out of the mid-century modern, but more of today. And we see this down from mixed-use structures that are very eclectic and beautifully done next to a event hall that might look like a futuristic spaceship type building or something. I think the eclecticness of that creates a little bit of that charm.
That's very interesting, because I've always said that first time coming down here, I thought Naples was very diverse. It's not Charleston. It's not neighborhoods in Washington or that are very kind of uniform. There was the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's
here.
right.
And it was an architectural style of diversity, and I think we should embrace that. That's part of its character and charm. So
absolutely.
What I'm hearing you say is, as generations come in here, they're going to seek different things, and it will just enhance that diversity, maybe in a different way.
Yeah, we see. I think you nailed it there. As different generations come, they're going to all have different backgrounds, and I think you're going to see. What I've seen are people that come from the Northeast in the Long Island, Cape Cod type neighborhoods. When they come down to Naples, they grew up with that kind of small town charm of the front porch, and they want the clapboard siding, and that's kind of what they want. Then you might have a little bit different diversity background. Some of our clients are from California these days, and they have desires for much more glass and modern flat roofs, and I think that's what makes Naples pretty special, is we have the ability to do all of that stuff. And we get one client, maybe 8 of them ask for a certain type of architecture, and 2 of them ask for the other, and we embrace all of them. We try to do the best we can with everything.
You're already experiencing that kind of different demands and different trends.
We are.
Yeah. Matthew, how do you think that those trends and that new generation coming in, what you're seeing maybe in the next 15 or 20 years, how do you think it's going to impact planning and development and design here in Naples? How we go about planning our community and changing our zoning and our land use codes and whatnot? Do you think it's going to have an impact?
I do, and it's going to be I think it's going to be a little bit of a clash of what the politics wants from that younger generation to what the older generation that has, like I said, made their money someplace else and wants a sleepy little beach town. I think you know well that a few years ago the city had a vision statement that was completed, and there was some polling done with that, and what came out of it is the buildings are too large, the traffic's too bad, and they want to scale things back. And politically, what's been frustrating is a vision is not a code. It's not a zoning code. It's a vision, and when your zoning codes and your vision don't align, that can be a challenge someday. And especially from the younger generation, I see they're used to being in more dense and urban environments. Maybe their brains will be geared to solving some of those issues a little bit better. But I think what we're going to have to do, I think the big challenge we're going to have is to get our codes and the vision to be, and I'm not necessarily saying that we have to change the code. Maybe the vision's what needs to be changed or altered slightly. But I think that's going to be a difficult problem for us all to solve.
Well, you mentioned like the older generation, the old guard, and went to sleepy little fishing village that was. I have several wealthy younger clients who are in economically and background-wise pretty much the same, but their vision and what they want is totally the opposite.
Yes.
I want something that's vibrant. I want activity. I want I want variety of restaurants. Where's the club?
Right.
They're looking for something that is almost the antithesis of us old timers.
And that's where I go back to saying maybe the vision was a little bit biased or was looked at in a different manner, or only solicited in certain ways, because I certainly don't see the vision of what they're pushing to be the vision to line up with our current zoning codes, and even that's super dangerous, because if you start changing codes, you start taking away private property rights, you start getting into personal damages and things like that. And I think you're exactly right. The younger generation that's going to take over, I mean, eventually this generations, they move. I mean, it's one to another, people die, and as that newer generation comes in, I think it'll be very interesting of how that shapes Naples. And I go back to, that's why it's important for the city to always, you know, take a look at the vision and modify it as necessary. Look at master planning different neighborhoods. Neighborhoods change. You know, what's funny is the D downtown, in my opinion, I was extremely passionate about it because it was something that I came into at the right time. When we did Naples Square 1111 Central, it became a catalyst for all these other restaurants and shops. And now, and it's the funny thing is the vision from the D downtown is working, and it took an extra 10 years because of our recession. And I think the economists were wrong with the baby boomers. They were about 10 years behind what was supposed to happen with ULI and so forth. But now I'm seeing that be vibrant, and the residents there love it, and they love walking to the different shops and so forth. But the politicians in town hate it. And the thing is, that vision was there 10 years ago, but it's actually working. It's coming to fruition, and that's what we're seeing. The politicians wanting to change is something that actually worked, which is very frustrating from an architectural point of view.
And it does take sometimes decades for a vision to kind of manifest itself.
It does. Yeah. Outside influences, it just, you know, it stopped it for a good 10 years, slowed it down. But it's funny, that code had a specific vision, and it came to fruition. And now people are seeing what that vision is. And I don't know if it looks different to them than what it did on paper, or they're just scared because it's working, and now it might be causing fear in our community that it's going to continue or get out of control.
I think that latter is probably what it is.
Yeah.
It can get out of control and take over the whole character.
Exactly.
So, let's move on to another topic.
Sure.
You've created probably the most successful architectural business in Southwest Florida, and you're expanding across the country. And this is really an enviable feat. I just envy you for doing this. We both know that most architectural schools don't leave their graduates with a lot of business skills. That's not their focus. I'm interested, how did you gain the knowledge and the ability to form, run, and grow a firm and still maintain design quality?
Boy, that's a really great question. I have to tell you, it's one of the things I'm probably most proud of from a career standpoint. I will tell you, it's on my list one of these days that I would love to write a book about this because they just simply don't teach you this in school. In fact, I remember my first professors, and in the first couple of weeks of graduate school, I would call that that was the real weed out period. I think we had 15 students in our class, and we ended up with like 7 graduating. But in those first couple of weeks, they really kind of hit home on if you're in this profession to make money, you should leave right now, because architects don't make money. They're poor their entire life. They're more aristocrats, or just kind of in a different genre that way. And I've never been motivated in my profession by money. I actually am motivated. I get up at 5 a.m. most mornings and actually draw, because that's my passion. I like to actually go in early and start the foundation of a project. I'll do the initial master plan, and it may be block out diagrams or whatever, but I can certainly get it to a point where I can hand it over to a colleague in the firm to take it to the next level, and know I'm not going to be wasting our time or have to circle back. But yes, architecture school, they didn't teach you anything about this. I think the book I remember was this tiny, I think it was called The Architectural Practice. And we had some classes on making mistakes. I've had, on construction documents, meaning more in the legal side of things, all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't until growing this firm that I really got excited, and a lot of that had to do with, and I did kind of happen into it. So it's not like I sat up with this genius master plan and how to do this. It started out with the Naples office becoming somewhat successful, growing in a short amount of time. A lot of that has to do with the right place at the right time, but also being very professional, working hard, really solving the problems for your clients like any architect would do in any location. And then I kind of sat back one weekend and thought, this is great. Wouldn't it be great to have this in another location? So I thought, what is the closest location to Naples from a clientele perspective? And I chose Palm Beach Island, and I went over there, and I made a big mistake. I signed a 7-year lease on a 2,000 square foot space that I needed a variance for because they only allow retail or restaurant on their ground floors, and I wanted the office to be in the walking district. I wanted people to see the model in the front window, and signed the lease, got the variance, did a tenant improvement, and it took me a year and a half to find the right person to run that firm, which was a nightmare. And I think I interviewed 16, 17 people for that job, just really who's the face for MHK over there. Got a lot of unqualified candidates, got a lot of candidates that were probably qualified but were from the Miami area and just really not driven to the same sort of architectural goals that we were as a firm, so I struggled with that. Lucked out, ended up getting a local architect after a couple years that was well politically balanced on Palm Beach Island, had worked her way to a ceiling within her firm, and ended up, her father was on city council at one point, well politically connected and so forth, and just sound like the perfect fit. Her talent was unbelievable. Brought her on board. And then I instantly figured out, and I was doing a lot of going back and forth from Naples to Palm Beach for those years, and figured out that, hey, this model works pretty good. And then out of the blue, I had an old employee from Naples that had moved to Greenville, South Carolina, that kind of said, hey, if you open a firm here, I'll run it for you. I've seen what you've been doing the past 10 years, so I took a chance there. I thought, well, if worst case scenario, if this doesn't work, I could use the production help there with what we have going on here, which balanced and worked very well. Next thing you know, within 6 months, he's saying, stop giving me work. We have enough work here. And that grew to 18 or so staff members and became very successful. And then it was just kind of one after another. I had another similar situation with an old employee from Naples that wanted to open office in Aspen, and we did the same thing. It's tough. It's a balance. We try to open these offices with licensed architects that are the experts in their local community. One of the things we wanted to do with growing the firm was to try to take a different model, like a Robert A.M. Stern type model that I saw doing some projects in Palm Beach. They are a large firm in New York City, very successful, and they will reach out as the big hub in a certain location, and they will reach out to different communities and do projects. We wanted to be the opposite. We wanted to have the talent on the ground in each community to be the local expert. And from an architectural perspective, you have to make that extremely profitable for those members. They're partners, whether you have partners or not. They're partners in your firm. But we found that model works really well. So if somebody's in Greenville, South Carolina, they're doing a residential project, at some point through reputation, just like here in Naples, they'll say, oh, Jeremy's the guy to go to. He's done 12 of these extremely beautiful houses, and that's the type of person we want running our project. And it's been great. So our firm's been, we have a very diverse firm. We have 10 offices now from the Florida Keys, in Islamorada, Naples, Sarasota, Charleston, South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, Highlands, North Carolina, which is 73 degrees every day during the summer. That's why that office exists. And Denver and Aspen, and I have such a great team. It's so much fun with today's technology. The COVID environment accelerated our growth tremendously because we were doing a go-to meeting here or there before COVID, and now Zoom runs our life. And there's nothing more fun than seeing the Brady Bunch theme of Zoom with all the directors sharing issues, sharing problems. Hey, I had this happen. How do you solve this? So we have these weekly directors meetings, which are a lot of fun, just to kind of, learn from somebody. And
so you've embraced the technology.
I have, yes, sir.
That's good. What advice would you give to a young emerging professional who's maybe just starting his own firm or has that as a goal for him? What advice would you give him to make a successful firm, to start a?
I would say the absolute best advice I could give is have a very hard work ethic. Keep your balance in life, but have a very hard work ethic. But become an expert in something. There's all kinds of things you could become an expert in. Maybe you're an expert in theater design, or you're an expert in churches, or an expert in city planning, components, parks, or single family, and so forth. Eventually, as your firm grows, you can become an expert in several different things with different mindsets. But I owe a lot of my success to being an expert. I'll tell you, I'll never forget my first big shot, and it's it was a furniture store. So I also worked very hard in the past, being a good steward of another firm. So I was an employee / partner, but mostly an employee in another firm in town for 14 years. And in that 14 years, towards the end of it, I was bringing in close to 100% of the clientele. I was managing close to 100% of the work. So I was running it as if it was my own shop. So I had the skills. I didn't just wake up one morning and say, I'm starting my own firm and not know what I was doing. And I'm a product of the recession too. So it was one of those points where I wasn't getting a paycheck, and I had to pay the mortgage. So I jumped ship, and I told my old boss I was going to start doing some houses in Old Naples because I didn't want to compete. But in those 14 years prior to that, working for that firm, I did become the expert of getting things approved in town. It seemed like I had a special sauce that I had created, and somebody came along and wanted to do a furniture store downtown. It was a 60,000 square foot furniture store building right downtown Naples, and I got a referral from a broker that I'd never even heard of on that project. Never even heard of them, but they said, when they sold the property, they said, if you want to get this approved, I think you should hire Matthew Kragh. And that was my start. And that goes back to becoming an expert in something. And I think that's really where I got that start. If I hadn't gotten that first big job, we would probably still be a 1, 2, 3 person firm today.
How do you get the message across that you are an expert, though? You can be an expert and nobody knows that.
Yes. Through years of trial and error. If there was some wood to knock on, I would knock on it a little bit. I touted the fact that I hadn't lost a planning zoning case in 25 years of practice up until this past year, and I lost 2 on the same day with the city council for lot combinations, something that nobody wants to go down on, single family lot combinations. But I've been very proud of the fact that again, going back to balance, there's a balance of these projects that we even let in the firm. One of the reasons I had a great track record is I wouldn't take something through the entitlement process unless I knew it was a good project and it was worthy of being approved. If it was something that was overstretching, I would I'd either tell the client they have to go find somebody else, or they would, or I would talk them into doing something else with their property. That's a big key.
What you just said is a very interesting thing, because I think most of our colleagues don't practice it. Saying no to a client.
Yes.
Go somewhere else. I can't do this for you. Too many of us get into a deep hole.
I will tell you that in the architecture practice, when you learn to say no, will be the best part of your career.
That's probably one of the best advices you can give to a young professional starting their business.
Yes, sir.
Good. Well, I want to end on a question that I ask everybody when we have these talks, and you maybe alluded to it a little earlier. What one accomplishment in your career are you the most proud of?
Obviously building the business to the practice it is today, but also taking that a bit further. One of the things I'm really proud of is being a really large part of this community. I mean, there's nothing more fun for me to drive around on the weekends with my kids, whether we're running errands or whatever, and my 6-year-old daughter yelling out the back seat, "Daddy did that building, Daddy did that building," and leaving a legacy. Not only in buildings, as you know, because you do great buildings, and it's got to be fun to see your own work as you pass it. But at the same time, now fostering these new, younger, some of them are my age, but leadership of architects that are doing their own work within our firm, and seeing how they feel about it, and seeing their families. Going to our Christmas party every year is eye-opening, where you see all the mouths that get fed through this profession. What a great team, down to the person that's doing bathroom details, up to the person that's doing the next high-rise on the beach type situation. It's amazing to see that growth and the talent from them, and to foster those architects to have the success that I kind of made through the middle of my career, I would say is really fun to see. But still, the number one to me is driving around town and just saying, hey, we helped create this.
Well, that sounds like there's two legacies there. One that is bricks and sticks, and the other one is a culture.
Yes, sir.
A firm culture that you've created that probably will have a life after you.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Absolutely. Hopefully they'll say, that building is, still looks good today and is of a timeless nature, instead of, hey, I can tell that was done in 2016.
By the way, write that book on business practice.
Yes, sir.
I think that would be a contribution to the profession.
I have a lot of downfalls in that book too, so I've learned a lot of hard lessons too.
It isn't all the positive. You got to say the negative.
Yes, sir.
Matthew, thank you so much for your time. I know you have a busy schedule, and for taking an hour off with us and sitting here over a cup of coffee and talking.
This was a true pleasure. I think more architects should get together and do this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Good to see you.
You too, sir. Thank you.